If someone had told me a year ago that my wife would ask to open our marriage, I would have laughed. Not because it was impossible, but because I thought our relationship was unbreakable. I believed we were a team, partners for life. I was wrong. For 7 years, I thought I had it all figured out. I married the woman I loved, and together, we built what I thought was a solid foundation. We had a 6-year-old child who lit up our lives, and I took pride in being a devoted husband and father. I worked hard to provide for my family. I never missed a school event, a birthday, or an anniversary. If there was a textbook definition of a good husband, I thought I fit the bill perfectly. I had no reason to believe otherwise. No fights, no cold shoulders, no signs of trouble. Life seemed normal. Perfectly normal. It was a Tuesday evening. Just an ordinary day. I remember it so clearly because at the time, it felt so insignificant because everything felt right. There were nothing to prepare me for what came next. If anything, my wife seemed perfectly happy. But after our child went to bed, she turned to me and started a conversation that would change everything. It wasn't a question, not a discussion, just a statement that hit me like a punch in the gut. I want to open our marriage. If you don't agree, I'll file for divorce. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. This was the woman I had built my life with, and the mother of my child. But in that moment, she felt like a complete stranger. There was no warmth in her voice, no trace of the woman I fell in love with. I stared at her, trying to process what I'd just heard. My thoughts were spinning out of control. I managed to stammer, "What? What are you talking about?" But she didn't offer any explanation. No apology, no reasoning, nothing to help me understand why she wanted to shatter everything we had built together. Instead, she repeated herself, "I need this. Either we open the marriage or we divorce. Those are your options." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought things were fine, but now everything I thought I knew about her and our marriage was being ripped away in an instant. "Why?" I asked her, my voice shaking. "Why are you doing this? Why do you think this is the answer?" Her response was as cold as her initial statement. "I just need something different." That's all she said. No plea for understanding, no reassurance that she still loved me, no effort to work through whatever she was feeling. Just those 4 words. I need something different. I begged her to reconsider. I told her we could work through whatever was wrong, that we could go to counseling, that I'd do whatever it took to fix our marriage. But she wasn't interested. I thought about our child, our 6-year-old. What would a divorce do to her? How would she cope with her world being torn apart? I did the only thing I felt I could do at the time. I agreed, but I gave her conditions. "Fine," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. "But we keep it private. Whatever you do, I don't want to hear about it. Don't bring it into this house. Don't let it interfere with our family." She agreed without hesitation, like she had already thought it through and was ready for me to cave. And just like that, my marriage, the life I had poured everything into, was no longer mine. The very next morning, she was out of the house early, claiming she had errands to run. She didn't come back until late in the evening. She didn't explain where she'd been, and I didn't ask. But I knew. She didn't waste a second. It was as if she had this waiting in the wings all along. She had already lined this up before she gave me her ultimatum. The thought burned in my chest. It wasn't just an open marriage. She had a specific man in mind. I felt like a placeholder, a safety net she was keeping around, just in case. I had agreed to this for the sake of my child. But it didn't make the pain any easier. Every time she left the house, I felt like I was breaking piece by piece. Her absence quickly became normal. She stopped coming home for dinner. Weekends were no longer family time. The life we built together felt like it was fading, day by day. Our home became a revolving door for her absence. She was still physically there, but emotionally, she was gone. I was holding the family together while she prioritized her new life. It didn't take long for her first relationship to fall apart. Within a few months, The man she had been seeing disappeared from her life. After that, she tried to start something new, dressing up, going out, coming home frustrated. Whatever she was looking for, she wasn't finding it. I could see it in her actions, even if she wouldn't admit it. The grass wasn't as green as she thought. By then, something inside me had already started to change. It began at our daughter's soccer practice. There was another parent I'd see there regularly, a divorced woman whose daughter played on the same team. At first, we'd exchange polite small talk about the kids, the coach, or the weather. Over time, those conversations grew deeper. She was kind, easy to talk to, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. She listened in a way that made me feel heard, something I hadn't felt in a long time. She had her own scars from a failed marriage, and maybe that's why she understood me so well. There was no judgment, no pity, just understanding. As our connection grew, I began to see myself differently. For so long, I had been focused on keeping my family together, on being the steady rock, that I'd forgotten something important. I was worth more than being a fallback. I deserved respect, appreciation, and love, not as an afterthought, but as a priority. One day, she asked to close the marriage. Her tone was calm, almost casual, but I could tell she was unsure of how I'd respond. I'd learned to live without her constant presence when she told me she wanted to end everything. The open marriage, my relationship. She said it wasn't appropriate for me to be dating our daughter's friend's mom and that she missed our life together. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Appropriate? She was the one who wanted this in the first place. She was the one who pushed me into something I never wanted, gave me no choice but to agree. And now she was telling me my relationship was a problem? The same relationship I found when I was picking up the pieces of what she had broken? Yeah, I questioned her motives. Was it really love she missed? I wondered. Or was it control? I looked at her sitting there, expecting me to just nod along and agree like I always had. But this time was different. I'd found someone who respected me, who valued me, not as a backup plan or safety net, but as an equal. That wasn't something I was ready to give up so easily. So, I told her, we can talk about closing the marriage, but I have conditions. She raised an eyebrow, surprised. Maybe she thought I'd just jump at the chance to go back to how things were. But I wasn't the same man anymore. I laid it out clearly. If you ever ask for an open marriage again, you will forfeit custody of our child and any rights to shared assets. No excuses, no second chances. That's my condition. She stared at me, stunned. Then came the anger. That's unfair, she said, her voice rising. You're being vindictive. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply replied, unfair? Vindictive? Let's call it what it is, accountability. You made your choices, and this is mine. She stormed off after that, slamming the door behind her. But I didn't regret my words. I wasn't going to let her dictate the terms of my life anymore, not after everything she'd put me through. It's hard to describe the pain of watching someone you once trusted weaponize your own child against you. But that's exactly what my wife did in the days that followed. She began whispering things into our daughter's ear, subtle at first, then more blatant as the days went on. She told her things like, Daddy doesn't want to live with us anymore, or he's planning to leave us for good. At 6 years old, my daughter didn't fully understand what was happening, but I could see the confusion in her eyes and how she started pulling away from me. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked up at me and asked, Daddy, are you leaving us? Her voice was trembling, barely above a whisper, and it shattered me. I held her close and promised, I will never leave you. No matter what happens. You are my world, and I will always be here for you. Her mother's words had planted a seed of fear that I was fighting desperately to uproot. What I didn't realize then was that the lies weren't just meant to hurt me. They were meant to make me look like the villain in my daughter's eyes. And that realization hurt more than anything else. It didn't take long before things hit a boiling point. One evening, after yet another silent dinner filled with tension, she snapped, accusing me of emotionally abandoning her. "You don't even care about us anymore," she shouted. "You've checked out of this marriage, and let's not pretend I don't know you're seeing someone." The accusation felt like a slap. I had spent so much of my energy trying to keep things together for our child's sake and my own sanity, and now she was twisting the narrative. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "If I've checked out," I said, keeping my voice steady, "it's because you kicked me out emotionally the moment you gave me an ultimatum. Open this marriage or lose everything. You wanted freedom, but you never considered the cost." She scoffed and rolled her eyes, but I pressed on. "You threw us into this chaos without warning, without any regard for how it might hurt me, or more importantly, our child. And now you're blaming me for the mess you created." Her expression shifted from anger to something that looked like guilt, but she didn't apologize. Instead, she deflected as always. The argument didn't solve anything. If anything, it made things worse. The house, once a haven, had become a battlefield. Hateful words were thrown around like they didn't matter, and the air was thick with resentment. Every interaction felt like walking through a minefield, and I could see the strain it was putting on our child. At night, I'd lie awake, replaying everything in my head. Was this my fault? Could I have done something differently to stop this from happening? But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, the truth was clear. I didn't break us. She did. Desperate for clarity, I started therapy. I needed someone to help me sort through the chaos in my mind and figure out the best path forward, not just for me, but for my child. In one session, my therapist said something that hit me hard. Sometimes, staying in a toxic environment does more harm to a child than separating. Children learn about relationships from what they see at home. What are they seeing now? Those words stuck with me. I thought about the arguments, the tension, the way our child had started withdrawing. The home we'd built, once filled with love and laughter, had become a place of hostility. It was tearing all of us apart. The therapist didn't outright tell me to file for divorce, but they gently suggested that it might be the healthiest option for everyone involved. "You can't pour from an empty cup," they said. "If you're not okay, how can you be the parent your child needs?" I left that session feeling heavier than ever. Divorce wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about uprooting a life, dividing a family, and starting over. But was staying together in this toxic mess really any better? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change for me and my child. Whether that meant divorce or finding some miraculous way to repair the damage, I wasn't sure. But one thing was clear: this wasn't sustainable.